was the 24th of February, 2022. The world woke up to the sound of explosions over Kiev. Russia had launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the largest military assault in Europe since World War II. What many thought would be a quick campaign turned into a brutal, grinding conflict, reshaping alliances, economies, and the balance of power across the globe. Today on World O'Clock, we explore how the war in Ukraine changed global politics forever, from the rise of new alliances to the return of old rivalries and a new age of global uncertainty.
When Russian forces crossed the Ukrainian border, it wasn't just a war between two nations, it was a test of the entire world order built after 1945. For decades, the West had believed large-scale invasions in Europe were unthinkable. That borders, once drawn, would hold, but Russia shattered that illusion overnight. Suddenly, the post-Cold War dream of a peaceful, integrated Europe was gone. Within days, NATO and the EU, long criticized for being bureaucratic and slow, reacted with unprecedented speed. Sanctions were imposed, billions in aid pledged, and Western unity, once fractured, was reborn. For many leaders, this was a wake-up call. History was not over. Geopolitics was back with a vengeance. Before the war, NATO seemed uncertain of its purpose. Donald Trump had called it obsolete. European nations had cut defense spending to historic lows. But the Ukraine war changed everything. Suddenly, NATO had a clear mission again: contain Russia. The alliance expanded. Finland joined in 2023, and Sweden soon followed, ending decades of neutrality. Even countries like Japan, South Korea, and Australia began closer coordination with NATO, signaling that security in Europe and Asia had become intertwined. In just 2 years, NATO became more united, more armed, and more relevant than it had been in decades. But unity came at a cost. The world was dividing into blocs once again. The Ukraine war reignited a global rivalry reminiscent of the Cold War, but this time, it's more complex. In the West, the US, Europe, Japan, and their allies. On the other side, Russia, China, and a growing list of countries skeptical of Western dominance. While Moscow fought on the battlefield, Beijing watched carefully, testing how the West responded. China didn't send troops, but it supported Russia diplomatically and economically. If the Cold War was fought with ideology, this one is fought with economics. The West unleashed massive sanctions against Russia, freezing assets, banning exports, and cutting Moscow off from global banking systems. But the move had ripple effects far beyond Europe. Global energy prices soared. Inflation hit record highs. And the world realized how interconnected everything had become. Europe, once dependent on Russian gas, was forced to find new suppliers overnight. Liquefied natural gas shipments from the US replaced pipelines from Siberia. Meanwhile, Russia turned to Asia, especially China and India, to sell its energy. Trade maps were redrawn in real time. The result? A more fragmented, more regionalized global economy, and the rise of economic nationalism, where countries prioritize resilience over globalization. Beyond the tanks and missiles, another war was raging, the war for information and technology. Ukraine used social media, satellite imagery, and drones with astonishing effectiveness, turning public opinion and intelligence into weapons. At the same time, Western tech companies withdrew from Russia, while Moscow and Beijing doubled down on building independent digital ecosystems. From semiconductors to AI, technology became the new frontline. Whoever controlled the chips and data would control the future. The Ukraine war proved that modern warfare is not just fought on land, sea, or air, but also in cyberspace and the cloud. For Europe, the war was a painful awakening. Germany, once deeply tied to Russian energy, reversed decades of policy. It boosted defense spending to historic levels and began rearming, something unthinkable just years earlier. The European Union, long seen as an economic bloc, suddenly became a strategic actor, funding weapons for Ukraine, coordinating sanctions, and working on a unified defense policy. For the first time in decades, Europe realized that peace could no longer be taken for granted. It had to be protected.
The Ukraine war also changed how other regions viewed conflict. In Taiwan, the invasion reignited fears of a Chinese attack. In the Middle East, oil producers saw leverage as global energy markets tightened. Even Africa felt the shock, as grain exports from Ukraine collapsed, causing food shortages and economic strain. Every corner of the globe was touched by a war fought thousands of miles away. The message was clear: in an interconnected world, no war is ever local. Amid all the politics and strategy, there's another side to this story, the human one. Ukraine's resistance inspired the world. Ordinary citizens, teachers, and farmers took up arms to defend their land. President Zelensky, once a comedian, became a global symbol of defiance. In a time of fear, Ukraine reminded the world that courage still matters, and that small nations can stand up to great powers when united by purpose. The war in Ukraine is not just a conflict, it's a mirror reflecting the 21st century's biggest questions. What happens when great powers challenge the rules of the world order? Can democracy and authoritarianism coexist peacefully? And who decides the balance between sovereignty and influence? The Ukraine war ended the illusion that globalization alone can keep peace. It showed that power still matters and that freedom still comes with a price. As the war continues, one truth becomes clear: the global order is shifting. A new era of competition has begun between East and West, democracy and autocracy, cooperation and confrontation. But out of crisis comes clarity. Nations are rethinking their alliances, industries, and identities. And as history shows, when the old order crumbles, a new one always rises.
The Ukraine war didn't just redraw maps, it redrew the future. From Kiev to Washington, from Beijing to Brussels, the echoes of this war will shape the next century. Because in every age, a single conflict defines the path of civilization. And in our time, that conflict is Ukraine. This is World O'Clock, where we explore the stories that shape our world and the lessons they leave behind.